Remember ALF Mania? Okay, maybe not, since that wasn't actually a thing, but from 1986 to 1990, everyone's favorite hairy and snarky alien life form from Melmac had a pretty successful TV run, paving the way for puppetry into evening sitcoms and inspiring youngsters to drink beer and microwave their cats.
It's not soda pop, it's beer.
You're about out of course.
The Alphaverse would expand into comics, cartoons, toys, and a handful of games, with today's title we're checking out being the only one released for a home video game console, and therefore the best. Or I guess technically also the worst. It's ALF on the Sega Master System. ALF on the Master System was released in 1989 exclusively in North America, one of the few SMS games not to be released abroad in other regions. It was developed by Nexa, with the bulk of the programming done by Kevin Segedi, only 20 years old at the time, and just his second game after his work on Monopoly for the Master System as well. It's also worth mentioning at the time Nexa was a part of Spectrum Holobyte, which eventually went on to acquire Microprose, and then eventually absorbed into Hasbro in the late 90s. Even more curious is how the original founder of Nexa, Gilman Louie, is now a member of the Presidential Intelligence Advisory Board and the U.S. Department of State's Foreign Affairs Policy Board. Clearly, we can thank this game for his rise to prominence. Getting into the game's premise, similarly to the story of the TV show, we find that ALF has crash-landed on Earth in the backyard of the Tanner family. His home planet was destroyed, but he hopes to reconvene with his Melmacian friends Skip and Rhonda, who have made their way to Mars. So it's up to you to help ALF find the necessary items and solve all the problems in his path to refueling his space scooter and blasting off into space, all the while being hunted down by the alien task force, amongst dealing with other various hazards in his way. The gameplay can be best described as a rudimentary adventure game mixed with platforming elements. Maybe even a simplified Metroidvania kind of situation, if you like to throw that term around. You'll need to explore for necessary items within the Tanner family home, the city streets and shops, bat-infested caves, cat-shark-infested waters, and ultimately the upper atmospheres of the planet to fly off into the stars. The manual gives you a few little hints to get started, but your patience will surely be tested a bit as you start out without much guidance or clarity on what to do next. But the first true obstacle you'll run into is ALF's play control and unforgiving hitbox, as your big and beautiful Alfer dies in one hit after getting anywhere near the myriad of rats, bats, bugs, bikers, and perverts. The only way to deal with them is to wear a $200 clown costume, obviously. But then an even faster dog will just eat that, and then the grabby hands jerks will just start showing up once more. ALF's only real offensive capability, other than his occasional jokes, is a giant stick of salami, which obviously is the only way to deal with bats living in a secret cave underneath your basement. This area actually requires a lot of precision in your jumping and combat, and often becomes the wall for most sane gaming enthusiasts to just turn the game off. But enough perseverance will get you to continue to progress through the next item in the chain of what you need to keep moving onward. You only get a handful of lives and one continue, but luckily the game is rather short once you know the sequence of events and get more resilient against the jank to be encountered. Throw some speedrun strats into the mix too, and you might be able to beat it in 5 or 6 minutes if the RNG cooperates. And you know those strats must be going hard when the world record pulls off moves like the auspicious double salami buster technique. So here comes the part of the review where I have to come to ALF's defense a bit. It's certainly been trashed on over the years as being one of the worst titles on the Sega Master System, and considered somewhat of an ugly abomination of an adventure game. But again, I like to have a wider outlook here. Actually playing through the game entirely ends up being pretty amusing, ranging from some of the goofy sprite work to a genuinely funny troll item, which I won't spoil in this video for the 1% of you that might actually play this someday. And it's got a surprisingly catchy soundtrack, considering they only had a $200 budget for sound, And I guess it's just a general lighthearted experience of figuring out the puzzles and dealing with some surprisingly challenging sections. Now, I can't exactly label this game as well made, but considering it was a 20-year-old's second gig programming a game and was also certainly rushed to commercial release despite its crude state, it's probably comparable to E.T. on the Atari 2600 in the fact that it doesn't really deserve as much hate as it has in the typical poop-flinging reviews of its past, most of which probably didn't bother actually beating the game. I think if you're either a fan of the character or janky adventure games in general, it's a game worth hopping through at least once, and undoubtedly a curious point in the history of the Master System. While this ALF iteration was the only one for a game console, ALF did make a few appearances on home computers. ALF: The First Adventure had been released previously for the Apple II, DOS, Commodore 64, and Atari ST, taking the form of an arcade-style maze game seeing him pick up spaceship parts, pizza, and of course, cats. ALF would also later be seen in a handful of DOS edutainment games like Add and Subtract with ALF, ALF's Thinking Skills, ALF's World of Words, ALF's US Geography, and ALF's Party Kit. Man, my next birthday is gonna be lit. Time to dig out that dot matrix printer. And to wrap things up here, special thanks to everyone supporting on Patreon and on Twitch, with ALF being the winner of the monthly game poll. And as usual, I had a great time streaming this one and putting this video piece together. We'll close out with words of wisdom from the Alfer himself. Life's like a sewer. You take what you can get. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you next time.